Will now be recorded.
Okay, so this is going to cover OSHA's COVID vaccination mandate and how to best implement it within KPA EHS's platform. So actually, I was taking a look at OSHA's website, and if you look at their COVID vaccination and testing ETS page, you can actually download a couple of their sample policies if you need those for internal reference too. These allow you to insert your company's name right into the document, and then you can, once you got that completed, you can upload those into the resources section into your KPA EHS platform. So quickly to do that, you would go to the multi option, and then you can actually just drag and drop your documents from your desktop or wherever they're saved. If you needed to create a new tag or a new folder, is kind of what the tags are, you can call this, COVID mandate policies or something like that. Oops. So that you know what it's titled. And then once you hit save changes here, that actually becomes a resource document that your users would be able to access at any time. And the next section would be to set up a employee custom field to be able to distinguish which users are vaccinated, unvaccinated, or exempt. And you can set this up by creating a custom list in the data list section under the control panel. And here we'll add a new list. And this one, you'll just title it whatever you need it to. So if you want it to be employee vaccination status, you can title it that, whatever you need to title it so that you know what it is. And then we'll have those three options of vaccinated, unvaccinated, and exempt. And then we'll make sure to save changes here. And that actually creates that list here for the employee vaccination status. The next thing to do is to connect this list to the employee profile. And how we do that is to go to the control panel again, and then under the employee settings here, you'll actually just add a new custom field right here. And then I just copied and pasted the same name from the data list and made it the same field name, but again, you can title that whatever you need to. And then here on your list, you'll just drop that down as a list type. And then this is how we connect it to that list that we created, those pickable options. And then this will become a filter or a drop down on the employee profile page. So we'll click done here. It now shows that. We'll want to make sure to scroll down and save changes, because if you don't, it won't remind you. So go ahead and save changes. And then now to confirm that it's working properly, you can go to my profile. And I can see that right here. I can click edit, and now I have those three options to say I'm vaccinated or not. Right now we'll leave that to none, because we're going to show you how to utilize the forms section to kind of capture that data next. So in the forms section, we do have library here that allows you to pull over two forms that are related to this. So in this case, it'll be the COVID-19 test results, which will be for the unvaccinated employees who need to enroll in weekly testing. And then I'm just going to close this out because there is one more, and that is the COVID-19 vaccination disclosure. This is where we're going to be able to capture that data to say if they are vaccinated or unvaccinated and or as exempt. So in this case, I do want to go to my form section here, and you can see I've got my vaccination disclosure and my test results right here. The first one, I do want to make a couple edits to the vaccination disclosure for that option for exempt. So right now, it just asks if they're yes or no. And if it's no, they just submit the form. If it's yes, they select if they had 1 or 2 doses. When they select 2 doses, it allows them to attach that copy of their vaccination card as well as their vaccination date. That way, if they're still in the single dose phase, you still have a copy of their most recent, and then they may be getting their second dose at a later date. If it selects no, then we'll set up a workflow to trigger to the managers to notify them. On this one, I actually want to edit this question, and I'm going to add yes, no, and exempt. So it's really just as easy as editing the fields, coming to the settings tab, and then you just add a new item here, and then it gives you a text area that you can type in what option you want to pre-fill here. And then when I hit done, that actually gives me another option here that's for exempt. I do want to add a couple things to happen whenever they select the exempt option. I want them to explain. Actually, I want a couple things to happen. I want a select field to say whether that exemption is religious or medical. And then I also want a text field to open up with that as well. And then a attachment field in case they want to attach anything as medical documents or anything else additional. So here I'm going to create another select field. If you click the white drop down arrow, it will quickly allow you to add a field below. And I can add a select field here. I went through quickly, a select field there. And then you would just title this whatever you want. So in this case, I'm going to ask for the exemption status, or you could say exemption type. Whatever terminology, again, you use, that's up to you. And then the settings tab here, we're going to make this mandatory. I just marked mandatory box because I do want them to fill it out. Also on the settings tab, how it goes left to right here is that rating style. So I'm going to change it to that rating style. And then I'm going to give those two options of medical or religious. And then again, I don't want this field to always show when they first fill out the form. So I'm going to actually set visibility options on this to say, I only want to show this field when this question is marked exempt. So we'll add a new condition. We're going to select, have you received the COVID vaccine? And then it says, is any of the following? And we're going to select only our exempt status, because that's going to say, we only want to show this field when it's marked exempt. And the next field I'm going to set up here is that text field that I described. So we're going to just have a please explain. I'm not going to make this one, I will make this one required, but I won't make the attachment field required because it may or may not have attachments to attach in this case. So again, making it mandatory on the settings tab for text fields, there's not too much other than if I want to give them more than 140 characters, I'll give them the paragraph style. So it's not just a single line. And then again, same visibility options to say that when this is only exempt. And then lastly, add another field below for the attachment. And then again, you can call this any attachments or whatever it needs to be. And then again, only if this is exempt. And so now if I preview this, I can select the name, say yes, and that pops up as normal, no pops open as normal, and exempt gives me a little bit more details here. So now that I have that all set up, I'm going to save these changes. And now the next part is to set up the workflows to say, once these forms are filled out, we want other actions to trigger up to our managers or whoever's needed to kind of complete these actions. So here in the control panel, you'll see the workflow list. This is actually where we can schedule out and say, once this form is submitted, we want these items to happen. So the first one I'm going to set up is to trigger that vaccination whenever it's no, so that we know that they need to be set up for that weekly testing. And again, whatever you need to title your workflow so that you know which each one is completely up to you. So again, we're going to trigger this one based off of that vaccination disclosure form. And then we don't want this to trigger on any response. We actually want to add a condition here. So we want to say that we only want this to trigger whenever it's selected as no. Actually, this would be for no and exempt in this case, because really we want to say if they're selecting no or exempt, we want their manager to review a little bit further. So we're going to select both options here, and then it does say if no or exempt, and then you'll save changes. And then the next thing you'll do is add a step. So again, this is just that manager review, or again, manager approval, or whatever you need it to be called here. Please review the COVID vaccination status and sign off, something like that. You can require them to have notes if you needed to. In this case, I'm just going to have them require a signature. And then where you make that assignment is actually from here. And this will lean on the employee's data from their profile. So if you wanted it to go to their supervisor in their profile that's listed on that user's profile, you can have it trigger automatically to the supervisor of that person who's submitting the form, and then they would get a copy of that to review from there. After that, you really don't need to do visibility or notifications because it's actually just going to automatically trigger that task to them. But there are options to trigger notifications to other users if you ever needed to as well. So here it's just as easy as saving after that. And then it's just a one-step task to say, hey, review any exempt or no items. And then the next step they would need to do for the manager is to go mark their profile as either exempt or, which again, we can add instructions in here. Also, please mark the user's employee vaccination status on their profile. So that would be the other task that that user would need to do, is they do need to go into their vaccination status for the profile and then go ahead and mark them exempt or unexempt from there. So, exempt or unvaccinated, excuse me. So again, if that manager got that profile, they would sign off, and then the other trigger would be for them to come into Elena's profile here and say she was unvaccinated or exempt for whatever reason, and then save changes. So that's kind of the first workflow for the exempt and when they're marked no. The other workflow that we need to set up is if they are positive results. So if they are added into that weekly COVID testing and they receive positive results on this test result form. So let me actually jump into that form so I can show you what that looks like really quickly. So pretty straightforward again, date of test, if it's negative or positive, and then they have an option to attach a copy of that test result. Now, if someone marks positive here, obviously that means they have COVID, and we want to trigger that to notify the manager above to tell that user, please don't come in, we don't want to get COVID. So in this case, we'll call this COVID test results positive. Again, whatever you need to call it so that you know what your workflows are doing for you, that's totally up to you. And on this, again, I don't want it to send on any response. I only want this to have a condition to say if they select positive test results, we want to notify that supervisor. So again, we'll call this a manager review and save changes. Whoops. Sorry about that. Okay, manager review, save. Oh, it takes me right in, apologize. Okay, and then from here we can say, you know, employee received positive COVID test results. Please inform employee to stay home, you know, X amount of days. Whatever, you know, you guys determine that is, you know, if it's 14 days, if you want them a little bit longer, however is needed for your organization, you would just type that data in here. And then again, they can sign off. Identify the responsible party. This would be who it's going to. Again, this case, I'm going to do the supervisor again. If you ever need to, if it's a certain person that receives these all the time, you can also do it to that particular person too by just selecting their name in the drop down too. So just as another note, if it goes to the same person for review every time, there are options to do that as well. So here we'll do supervisor, and then again, we're just going to save this change so that this only triggers to their supervisor when they select that it's a positive result. I'm typically looking for the save button at the bottom. Apologize, it's right there in front of me. Okay, so now we have those two workflows for the exempt, and in fact, I should say exempt no and exempt. That way we know that those are both for no and exempt options here. And then that pretty much covers our two statuses to kind of trigger those things. So the last step here is to actually create those tasks to send out these forms now. Obviously, you want to set up your workflows first and have your forms in place and all those changes before you're scheduling those tasks out to go to the users. So that's why I waited till the last step for this one. So the next thing you'll want to do is go to your control panel. And then you can schedule a task here. And in this one, we're going to assign a new task here, and then this can be, you know, that COVID disclosure, and we can mark it to everyone. The task due date will assign on that due date, so if you are wanting it to trigger today to send them the task immediately, just note this isn't something that says it assigns it that day basically. So you can't say on the 19th, they have until the 19th to complete this. It's actually going to trigger on the 19th, and then it would be due until they complete it. So if you want it to trigger immediately, you'll just leave today's date. And then here is where we're going to choose our form. We're not going to have it repeat because obviously we just want them to fill it out one time so that we can get their statuses. So that's the first task. Then we are also going to set up another task for any employee that would be in that unvaccinated status to have to fill out that weekly form. So in this case, we are going to set up that weekly COVID testing. And we're not going to assign it to everyone because this would only be for those unvaccinated users. So we're actually going to limit it down. And since we created that list and attached it to the employee profile, we can actually add that as a condition now to say that when their employee's vaccination status is unvaccinated, then we're going to trigger this weekly COVID testing form to be sent to them. So here we'll go ahead and put that as the form. And then in this case, it is going to be recurring. So this is where we're going to set up that weekly frequency. And you can either do it as a rolling schedule if you wanted to, or if you need to, you can trigger a day of the week, which is what I recommend doing. That way it triggers every Monday or every Tuesday If you need to adjust the date, it changes. You would just change the date, and then that will show you every Tuesday there. So if you want to give them Monday to kind of get their test results or whatever, and give them Tuesday to kind of submit that task, you can have it trigger every Tuesday. In this case, I'm just going to do every Monday. And then now, again, it says 0 people because right now we haven't assigned anybody the unvaccinated status. But if they were added to that status, then that's where that trigger is going to come from and assign them. So we're going to add this task here. And then now that gives me those 2. It actually won't show the other one until we assign it to a user, and then it'll actually populate down here in our list. So it looks like we don't have it set up, but it is actually set up just hiding in the back end until we actually assign a user an unvaccinated status. And then it would trigger that task notification to myself. As you can see, I have weekly COVID testing now, and then I also have my disclosure form. So that's going to be kind of that important process of the manager coming in and marking them whether they're vaccinated, unvaccinated, or exempt to trigger that task to the user for those weekly reports to fill out. Another thing along those lines, you can also go back into the form section and look at your responses and quickly run a status if they're exempt, whether they've been checking medical or religion options. You can click on this, it'll give you a bar graph of yes, no, or exempt options of what's being selected in the form, and anything else that you need to look at as well. As far as those, how many doses have been received, those kind of capture on a pie graph and bar graph as you're looking through the data. Additionally, as a user, if I come through here and marked my options here and yes, and whatever the dates are and so forth, if I attach, let me just attach our KPA logo. I just want to show you what some response data looks like here. I can view the response. That actually clears from my open task here. I could go back into my response data here and again see that pie graph a little bit better of what's been selected. Yes, no's, see employees who filled out theirs, as well as the control panel under your scheduled task will also give you that tracking too of how many employees have filled it out based off of who it's been assigned to and how many completions have been completed as well. So there's a few reporting options that you can kind of push and pull and see your data from there as well. Another note too for a manager report is we could also run scheduled reports, which would give you a batch overview of that data as well. So you can also create a scheduled report that was, the weekly COVID disclosure. And you could have this run every week. We'll just say Monday at 8 a.m. And then we're going to add our data here of pulling those form responses. So we'll just choose our vaccination disclosure. I'll leave it to the last 7 days of data since I'm wanting a weekly snapshot. And then I can add an action to email me or multiple people. So if I wanted it to go to me and Derek Brown, then I can attach an email and say, this is the weekly COVID disclosure. And then I can attach it in a spreadsheet option if I want to see that, so I can filter by people in the data that's reported. And then I can just save, and then now that would be a scheduled weekly report that would be emailing me those as well, on top of already getting the notifications of triggers from the workflow if I'm assigned to that person as their supervisor. So lots of different tools to kind of track that and give you everything that you need to track those mandates. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to help@kpaehs.com.